Welcome everyone who's joining us today. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining us from.
I wrote a sticky note and put it on my computer that says, "Be the sponge."
There are some school-specific sponsorships which make you feel like more inclined towards them.
While you're in MBA, you have an unprecedented access to a lot of people, be it alums, recruiters, so your professors, your career services. Make the most out of your time, talk to people, get a clear understanding of what you want to go into.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone around the world. Thank you for joining us today. Nifty little trailer there from GMAT Club for their upcoming Spotlight Fair, June 13th and 14th. I think if you're here joining us today through GMAT Club, you are probably already well familiar with that. But if you're not, please do check it out. Over 25 MBA programs attending. You can register for specific school-specific sessions, as well as a variety of other segments coming up just 5 days from now, June 13th and 14th. My name is Greg Guglielmo. I'm the founder of Avanti Prep, and we are here today to discuss the overlooked importance, the often overlooked importance of what I like to call school research and engagement. We're going to focus more on the engagement part of that, you could say, AKA networking. We're going to cover how to network with MBA programs, and as importantly, maybe even more importantly, how to take those insights and what you learn through your networking to communicate your unique fit with programs. Avanti Prep is a prominent, well-known admissions consulting firm. We've been partnering with GMAT Club now our 7th year partnering with GMAT Club. So we've done a variety of videos on a variety of topics along the way. It's our first time kind of going through a tutorial of this type for school engagement. It's certainly something we focus on when we work with clients. We work with clients, applicants from all around the world, a variety of pretty much any professional background, personal background, country, city. At this point, we've worked with applicants from those locations and backgrounds. We welcome the opportunity to chat with you. You'll see some of the links, I think, along the way. And we'll talk a little bit more about some discounts that we're offering coming out of this video toward the end. Anyway, let's get into the topic at hand. We're going to try to make this, I guess, as hands-on and tangible for you as possible. I am going to be flipping around the screens a little bit and sharing my screen to look at how to contact students, how to reach out to admissions, how to engage with clubs, how different schools present this, how different MBA programs present this information, and create avenues for you to do it. So a little bit unorthodox. I'm not in presentation mode on my PowerPoint here, on my slides here, but it gives us a little bit more flexibility to skip around. A little bit of a disclaimer or clarification up front about what we're not here to do and what we don't want to do as it relates to MBA networking, and what we do want to do. What do we not want to do? Or keep in mind, this is not really a contest as to who can laundry list the most touch points. Once in a while you run into an applicant and say, hey, I spoke with 15 people at a given school and I listed them all in my application, the application question where they ask who you've engaged with. And it feels like this blitz, almost like overkill. It was blind networking, and it doesn't really translate into real insights and a real articulation of fit with that program. So we are not here to learn how to blitz programs or laundry list the most touch points or network blindly. What we are here to do, and what we do want to do, is figure out how can we have thoughtful and authentic interactions with programs. You can see it all listed there. How could we unearth deep and relevant insights about the programs that we're learning about and ultimately perhaps applying to? How can we enrich our ability to articulate unique fit with each program in our applications, in our essays, and perhaps elsewhere, in our interviews later on, certainly. How along the way, this very commonly happens. I remember it happening, a little over a decade ago now when I was an MBA applicant. Along the way, and as you have these conversations and interactions, you're sort of developing your own. You might have an idea as to your post MBA goals as you enter this process, but they are just evolving and evolving and enriching along the way. The reasons why you want to pursue an MBA, you might have had one idea when you entered this process. The more people you talk to, the more ideas you have, the more specificity develops. You also develop contribution ideas along the way. How can you uniquely contribute to an MBA program? And hopefully all of this helps you land at the right place for you. You'll talk to people, hopefully, at a variety of programs, learn about those programs. Can they help get you to where you want to be post MBA? Do you have that kind of gut feeling, that click, that chemistry with schools? All of this is gonna help you figure that out. Where does it fit into the process? This is a visual that I think there's so much in the MBA application process. How do we organize that? How do we make that tangible and actionable? This is a visual that I like to use. It's a bit of a way that we think about at Avanti Prep the application process, starting at the top and kind of moving downward toward the bottom. Pre-application advisory is something before you even apply. That's a year or two or more before you would apply. This also, by the way, is a little bit of how we approach our services as well. So pre-application advisory, that happens to be a service that we offer. So that's before you're even, year two before you even apply. In blue, dark blue toward the top, you have these planning steps, profile assessments, initial assessments, actually a questionnaire that we send applicants to dissect all the different experiences, to rip all the wires out of the wall of your life, to figure out what's in there and who you are and what makes you unique and why MBA and what unique stories you have. During that process, we might undertake school selection, help you develop your post-MBA goals and identify concrete reasons why you need an MBA, help you develop your story and stories. These four big pillars in the middle are what I often refer to or describe to people as the four kind of execution pillars. Once you've done of the application process, once you've done a lot of that pre-planning and strategization in the beginning at the top of this page, what are the execution pillars that you're mining through and should always kind of have in your mind as you go through the application process? I mean, you might also be taking the GMAT or the GRE. That's not pictured here on the page. This speaks more to the application process. And you'll see, perhaps surprisingly, I don't know that a lot of people make school research and engagement such a prominent focus or prominent pillar, but one of those four pillars, as shown here on the page, is school research and engagement. Toward the bottom, by the way, application entries, certainly not to be ignored, making sure you're making the most of the space in your applications. Interview prep, sometimes interview essays or interview videos. Some schools have require those as well if you're invited to interview. Waitlist support, scholarship negotiations. And at the very, very, very bottom, after you're enrolled, we do have a lot of clients reach back out to us for cover letter reviews, resume, like recruiting, once they're enrolled in an MBA program and recruiting, professional cover letter reviews, professional resumes, even some professional interview prep. But the focus here, highlighted in yellow toward the left of the screen, is school research and engagement, which not unintentionally we position to people as a key pillar of the application process, right there alongside your essays, your resume, your recommendations. And this is, again, it's both a process as well as the menu, if you will, the totality of services that we could potentially help you out with and work with you on. Another little quick way to visualize this, just because school research and engagement, you could almost stretch it out through the totality of the process from the very, very beginning to the very, very, very end. I had a little bit of animation in here with some highlights and some stars and stuff, but it basically, it affects almost everything, or it can enhance almost everything. The most obvious ones would be school selection. Well, getting to know schools is going to help you figure out what's the right school for me, what's the right school for my goals, and what the areas that I want to recruit into and the jobs I want to recruit into. It's going to help you figure out what those goals are and sharpen those goals. You might know that you want to go into technology post MBA, but through this process, you're going to refine or figure out which technology companies recruit at the schools that I'm interested in. Which offices do they hire into? Which teams, which roles, how technical of a background do I need to have in order to be competitive for those jobs? So it's going to help you help shape your goals. You think about your profile, your initial assessment, your story. School research and engagement is going to help you think about all of that in terms of what the schools you're interested in are looking for. And we're going to look at specific ways, specific manifestations of all of this. Later on, your interviews, certainly you're going to need to be able to speak deeply, authentically, specifically to why you're a good fit. That happens in your essays, to a great degree as well. Essays is one of the most prominent ways that school research and engagement translates interview prep I was just talking about, waitlist support later on. So that's enough said there, I think, but that's where this all fits into the process. All right. The more fun and tangible stuff, the who and the what of MBA networking. So like, what does this all mean? Who can I reach out to? How do I go about that? There are a few different categories. I think if you had to simplify things, you would say there are people that I can connect with, and there are events that I can attend. On the people side of things, we're going to pull up some examples and try to bring this to life for you. On the people side of things, there are students, there are alumni, and there are admissions officers, perhaps among others. Student ambassadors, every school is going to have some version or some bench of current students who are designated to interact with prospective students. We'll pull up some examples of those and how to reach out to them. There are going to be clubs that you want to connect with. If you're interested, I used the example of tech before. I'm interested in recruiting in technology. Well, I should probably reach out to somebody in the technology club to understand what are the unique resources at that school and what are the recruiting dynamics for the industry or the jobs that I'm interested in. There are affinity groups, social, more socially oriented clubs, perhaps cultural, perhaps geographic in nature. And we'll look at some ways to connect with those as well. Alumni, that could be a little bit trickier. Sometimes you don't have alumni from a certain school in your existing network, but some people do have colleagues, maybe more senior colleagues working at their organization that they could reach out to, let them know they're applying, set up a coffee chat with them. You might look for warm intros through friends of friends, second degree connections. Other people launch a little bit of a, polite outreach through LinkedIn. We'll look at admissions as well. And with admissions, how do I connect with admissions committees? Well, you can do that at events listed at the bottom of the page, but we'll also want to take a look at how to assess the openness of, to what degree is it possible to connect with admissions at different schools? And do certain admissions committees have some form of sector coverage, meaning which admissions person or which admissions director, specifically focuses on military candidates or a certain part of the world, or the consortium or what have you. We'll take a look at some events as well. Let's just pull these up. So I'm going to flip screens here and share a window that hopefully brings this to life. So we're going to start here. I mentioned connecting with students a moment ago. We'll mine through some of these tabs. This is Columbia Business School's contact a student page. I bring it up because it's actually, I think, one of the more robust ones out there and a good example for us to look at to help you think about how to connect. So Columbia Business School terms this their Hermes Society, a student-run organization that works with admissions to host events, connect with prospective students, and welcome admitted students to the CBS family. Why is it so robust, and why am I bringing it up? They actually let you filter by area of focus. You actually, I don't think can see that drop down, but if I click area of focus, you'll see different industries or different areas of interest, post-MBA industry, pre-MBA industry, specific clubs, different types of degrees, a full-time MBA, J-term, executive MBA. So you end up with, let's see if I pick, I want to connect with someone in technology from the home region of Asia. I can filter, and look at that. I've got a whole series of options. So this is, again, one of the most robust and filterable versions of being able to connect with students. It gives you the ability to target who you're reaching out to in order to make the most of those contacts. In order to say, hey, I'm from this geography, or I'm interested in this particular topic or subject area or career, I could connect with somebody from that. This is Booth's version of the same thing. It is also quite filterable. Even country captains listed there as well. This is Haas's version. It's actually how I got my start in admissions, was as a Haas student ambassador, a student member of admissions at Haas. Haas has a bench of 8 or 9 student ambassadors each year, the student arm of the admissions office. And what they're doing, you'll see these little different, in the Columbia example a minute ago, you pull it up and it'll give you the email address of the individual that you could potentially target. We're going to look at some example emails and some example questions and stuff in a few minutes. Haas here now has introduced, we used to have an inbox that people would reach out to, but you can now schedule virtual meetings directly with some of these individuals. It'll take you to some sort of a Calendly link. And we're going to talk about do's and don'ts and stuff like that as far as these interactions are concerned. UT Austin, Macombs, another example here, they invite you. This is actually shortly after you apply, to connect with one of their student ambassadors, a virtual get to know you. And they give you some tips. We're going to revisit that page in a little bit. If you have to go straight to clubs, or if you want to go straight to clubs, here's a Wharton's club page, and you'll see that some clubs have listed their website and their email address. Here is Michigan Ross's version of the same thing. So a robust array of resources for you to connect with students in relevant fields and to really target and filter those. And again, we're going to look at, how do I approach this? And okay, now I know where to look, but what am I looking, what am I actually doing once I get into all that? On the admissions side of the coin, let's take a look at a Darden example. Here, this is Darden's Connect page. How can we help? One of the options on here is to connect with admissions. So I mentioned a moment ago when we had the slides up, you want to kind of assess the openness of a given program to connection, like in what you'll be able to use to discern. What are they pointing me toward? What are they pointing prospective applicants toward as ways to connect with students or admissions? Again, you'll see those filterable student ambassador lists. Certain clubs will have websites. If you actually click on certain clubs' websites, you'll see examples of being able to, access some mentorship even, or some application guidance. A lot of military clubs do that, for example. So Darden, if you want to connect with admissions, they seem to point you toward a coffee chat. They give you the opportunity to join virtual coffee chats. I think I shared a tab and not a window. There we go. Darden gives you the opportunity to join coffee chats in this case, virtual coffee chats with their members of admissions. And these are ways to get involved. You sign up for these. There's going to be other students on them very likely, but you never know how many, especially, still kind of early season here. And you might get a good opportunity to ask meaningful questions and to get a little bit of FaceTime and airtime. This is Cornell Johnson. The reason I bring them up is if I scroll down on their page and click on staff, I will see some of the personnel, some of the admissions officers listed here, and they actually, in some cases, will list whether, so here's Hannah in admissions at Cornell Johnson. In her role description, it notes some of the applicant pools that she specializes in working with. So that's good information to have. Good thing to be aware of. And they do give you the opportunity to connect with or chat with Hannah. Do you want to just do this willy-nilly and unprepared and with no questions? No, you don't. We'll talk about some ways to kind of prepare for and thoughtfully reach out to an admissions officer if you do have the opportunity to chat. Now, if you look around too, these are a couple of executive MBA programs. This is Booth's executive program. This is going to be a little bit more common with executive MBA programs. Booth's executive MBA program, they give you the opportunity to request a CV review, a resume review. You could send in your CV or resume, connect with admissions, and they'll give you a little bit of feedback or guidance as to whether you're the right fit. This is much, much less common on the full-time MBA side of things, but it does exist. I did want to point it out on the executive side because, if you look around, and once in a while, you will even see a full-time program that does something like this. Again, here, just like you don't want to willy-nilly, unprepared, fire off requests to admissions personnel and students, you want to be kind of thoughtful about it. You don't want to just grab any old, resume that you haven't touched in 6 years and it looks really sloppy and shoot that off. This is an initial impression building kind of thing. So it doesn't have to be the final resume that you submit with your application, but you should get it to a good, a good point or a good status. Quick aside on that too is, some people say, if we look back at that kind of visual of all the different things and all the different parts that go into an application process, and I mentioned that the 4 pillars of application execution include essays and resume and recommendations and school research and engagement. There is a good line of thinking where, hey, maybe I should get my resume in shape early or earlier in the process so that I have it as a tool, a refined tool, perhaps not a totally finalized tool, but a refined tool to attach or send around, not only in cases like this, but if you are reaching out to clubs or students as well. That can be a good kind of impression building device and help acclimate them with who you are. This is the Wharton MBA for executives, the Wharton EMBA. Again, perhaps not super relevant to a lot of people on here thinking about full-time programs, but just noting and pointing out they offer the ability to schedule a conversation with admissions as well. These conversations are technically informal and technically not evaluative. You certainly don't need to prepare for them to the degree that you would an actual interview, but you should still be ready for any of these kind of interactions, student, alumni, admissions, with good questions, interesting questions, some ability to answer. If they say, tell me about yourself at the beginning of that conversation, if they say, why are you interested in an MBA, or what are your career goals post MBA, or why are you, preliminarily interested in our program? Those are interview questions oftentimes that come up during real interviews later on. You don't need to be as good, I'd say, as you hopefully would be in an interview later on, but you will want to have some degree of prep and smoothness. Ironic that I botched that word, smoothness, but prep and smoothness as you approach these interactions. And finally here, I mentioned, this is Booth's Armed Forces group. This is, what you might call an affinity group, or a group that caters to people who come from a certain type of professional background. A lot of these clubs and other clubs like it will offer the opportunity for prospective applicants to access some version of mentorship. So you're not only is it the ability to, learn more about Booth and get plugged in with the, in this case, Veterans Network at Booth. It's actually an opportunity to get a little bit of advice and mentorship on your applications, and to understand how the people there approach the application process. It's not going to be as, this type of mentorship is not going to be as like long-term and deep as so as to cover the entirety of the application process, or as long-term and deep as many admissions consulting engagements would be. But it is an excellent resource where it exists. You kind of have to look around and see which of these clubs do I come from or connect with. Do they offer some sort of semi-formal application mentorship? Sometimes you'll find that the people you talk to, even if a club doesn't offer semi-formal application mentorship and advice, the people you talk to are kind enough to offer a little bit of it. Some of these clubs do also serve as informal arms with admissions. There are schools where, an armed forces club, as an example, a veterans group, will meet with admissions every 2 weeks to talk about outreach and who they're connecting with from a prospective student standpoint, and what are veteran military applicants or applications looking like from the upcoming class or into the upcoming class. So there are even examples out there where clubs like this will do the first kind of read over of resumes. You're starting to get quasi-formal, I think, with that in terms of evaluative value. All of it kind of circles back to why is it valuable to make these connections, and why is it also very important to make sure you're not being sloppy or haphazard when you do so. You want to be authentic and real, and a real person when you do it, not some sort of professional statue. I'm not suggesting that, but you don't want to treat them too informally. They are impression building opportunities. Let's go back to let's take a look at some examples just while we're still here on the internet. So events. This is LBSs, an example, just trying to hit a variety of different schools here, and there's going to be versions of this at every single program that's out there. LBS, I like their events page because it is very robust. It shows not only LBS's own events, but also other kind of third-party and MBA relevant groups that offer events on here. You'll see an admissions fair in Amsterdam, how to meet LBS in Jakarta. Now that we're on the other side of COVID, this might be a little bit, vaguer for people who over the last 3 years have been navigating this space or dabbling in the MBA world. Prior to COVID, MBA programs and admissions officers really kind of did global events. There was a lot of travel. They're coming to a city near you or your country. You could see here, these are basically back now. You can meet LBS in Jakarta on today, in fact. There are coffee chats. There are MBA information sessions. And you'll see kind of where these tours take you. So you can filter toward the top of this page. Tuck's got a version of this as well. Happy hours and coffee chats with admissions. They're going down to New Orleans. There's an admissions workshop for military applicants. There's a summer visit day. So use these, again, not a contest who can attend the most and list the most later on in their applications, but look around at the schools you're interested in, see what the offerings are, and see if there are a couple of, maybe it's an MBA information session for a school you're interested in to acclimate you with their process and how they think about their program. Maybe you come from a certain professional group or geography where they're going to be, or where they're for whom they're hosting a specific workshop. You could join that. You're gonna meet admissions officers along the way through this. You might even have repeat interactions with certain of them, and maybe you send an email to a certain admissions officer that you clicked with along the way. It's all kind of this formal and informal networking. And how do you learn more and more and more about the schools? How do you make good impressions and some connections along the way? There are campus visits. They're not required to, I think if you look around and you hear most admissions committees talk about this, campus visits are not formally required, but there's a little bit of a but to that. And the but to that in my mind is, if you live, by the way, what does a campus visit typically entail? It's usually going to be some sort of half-day program. I pulled up Haas's here. I have a little bit of an affinity for it because I, like many student ambassadors, was in charge of organizing, hosting and running it when I was a student there. Again, great way to meet prospective applicants, acclimate them with Haas. It's usually going to include some sort of class visit. You can see here a coffee chat with current students, a lunch. You sit down at a lunch on campus. Oftentimes there will be current students, a couple of current students at that lunch. Sometimes perhaps somebody from the admissions office or some other staff member. There'll be an admissions Q&A. There'll be info sessions, tours. Take advantage of visits if you do them, though. You're not limited. You don't show up to campus from 9 to 2 o'clock in this example and then just leave. Think about, if you're reaching out to current students or some of those clubs or student ambassadors at a given school, how can you further enrich your time there? You're probably already taking the day off of work. If you're there, make the most of the rest of the day after 2 o'clock in this example. Set up coffee chats with some of the club contacts, people in relevant professional circles, or who share your industry interests. See what else you could do. Sometimes there's a certain initiative or office that they might run. Maybe you poke your head, that is of interest to you, and you could poke your head in there. Here is Booth's version of the same. By the way, visits usually going to be during the semester. I think that's why I had Booth's up. It resumes October 2nd. You'll see that there are office hours with admissions personnel if you go to Booth's. Visit. You're not going to get during the summer. In other words, you're not going to get like the whole buzz of campus because people are gone for the summer. There will still be some opportunities for you to do things while you're there during the summer. I was talking for a moment ago about whether campus visits are required, and the general answer is no. You should not feel compelled if you live super far away or something. Like, oh my goodness, I really need to visit campus, and that's going to be the differentiator for me to get in. A couple of buts to that, a couple of nuances to that are, I mean, if you live in an area very near to or adjacent to, within striking distance, let's say, of a certain program that you're interested in, I think you should visit. I think if you live in New York or the New York area and you're applying to Columbia Business School or Stern and you haven't visited, I think a lot of people would say that kind of looks odd or uninterested. You got to seize that opportunity. Wharton would be in similar striking distance. Tuck, using this kind of New York, if I live in the New York area example, Cornell, Tuck, Yale, there are a lot of schools within striking distance. I think you do want to use those opportunities to deepen your understanding of the school, to express that interest. It doesn't mean that if you go, then, all of a sudden you are going to get in just because you went and visited. But it is something to keep in mind and flag and note, and you're kind of reading the tea leaves as you go along. If you live on the East Coast of the United States and you're concerned, you really want to go to Haas or UCLA Anderson, and you're concerned that, they think you're really more interested in Columbia or something, but you really, really want to go to the West Coast, maybe later on, if they're still running a Super Saturday, some schools will still run, Super Saturday interviews. Maybe you take the opportunity to accept that invitation and fly out there to do your interview and participate in a program. Another way to get down to these programs is a good segue actually into Duke. Duke Fuqua is one of the kind of handful of prominent programs that actually guarantees you an interview if they maintain this policy this fall, to voluntarily sign up for an interview and go down to campus during an open interview period. And you can potentially, if the dates line up, look at some of these other on-campus symposia or conferences or events that exist. These are just some examples, and every school is going to have kind of a version of it. We're using Duke Fuqua here. They have Women's Leadership Weekend. They have a workshop for minority applicants. Tuck has DivCo. Every school has some sort of symposia or conferences for various groups. Here's the Veterans Symposium for military applicants at Duke. Pride Weekend. Look at those dates. If you're super interested in a school and it's not too financially cumbersome or professionally impossible for you to get there, it's something to think about. Do you need to fly across oceans and stuff like this to attend these weekends? No, I don't think you should feel like that. There are often actually virtual ways to attend, but look to see if those virtual ways do exist. As mentioned again, Fuqua's open interview period. Darden is another school where if you apply by a certain date, at least in recent years, Tuck, if you apply by September 1st in recent years, you guarantee yourself an interview. Look for opportunities like that. Another little kind of interesting thing, a little less common, I would say. This is NYU Stern. This is a list of their MBA conferences from for 2023 and 2024. You do have to check with these are not specifically targeted for prospective students, but if you live in New York and you're interested in going to NYU Stern, or you live within striking distance of New York, you're so interested in NYU Stern, check out these MBA conferences. They're usually student-run conferences. You could usually buy a ticket for them. They actually want people to attend. Just make sure that they're not kind of closed off and just MBA-only conferences. Oftentimes they're not. And if you're really interested in NYU Stern in this example, or really interested in a certain one of these topics, and you plan to go visit NYU Stern, why not do it like the day before or the same day as one of these conferences? That becomes just such an interesting overture and way to learn and way to filter back to communicate fit in your applications. Again, does it mean you're going to get in? No, because you attended a conference, but these are all tools to enrich your understanding of a school, and to potentially articulate unique fit points in your applications. There are other organizations like the consortium that will have their own calendar of events. You could see webinars with member schools listed here. Those are going to pick up, I think as we get closer to deadline time. Forte Foundation has a whole variety of events, and GMAT Club, of course, next week, June 13th and 14th, has their Spotlight Fair. So a long walk, a deep walk through a variety of different resources there, but hopefully that does bring this to life for you a little bit. Let's go talk about some do's and don'ts. I've alluded to these along the way here. Some do's and don'ts of MBA networking. So these are not evaluative, oftentimes, or almost always, not formally evaluative interactions, but you do want to make a good impression. You want to be polite, professional, and respectful of people's time. I spoke a few minutes ago about how to be prepared for these conversations. It doesn't mean you have to be as prepared as you'll ultimately want to be for an interview or something like that, but have some interesting questions. And we'll take a look at some examples in a minute, but have some interesting questions ready to go. Be ready to speak at least at kind of an introductory or preliminary level about who you are, why you're interested in MBA, why you're interested in that program. Send brief thank you emails. Circle back. later on. These are professional interactions. In fact, a lot of, or quasi-professional interactions, a lot of people that we work with at Avanti Prep actually feel like, among the many benefits of our work together is helping them learn how to network, if you will, but how to kind of message these interactions, what length and cadence of email is appropriate. What does this form of networking and interaction look like and feel like, and how is it done appropriately and correctly? And that's a skill. That's, I think, a skill that you can carry with you into professional recruiting and into your professional career beyond. So if that's what we do want to do, what do we not want to do? We don't want to make a bad impression. What can result in a bad impression? Overly long emails is one. I mentioned, as a student ambassador, a decade ago myself, we used to manage the inbox. You would sometimes get emails that were paragraph after paragraph after paragraph where someone's telling you their life story in an email. Let's avoid that. You're interacting with people. You're being respectful of their time. These emails are a few sentences, typically. Don't act unprofessionally. Don't be sloppy. You'll see emails sometimes where people are interacting with admissions and there's no punctuation in the email. All lowercase, typed on typed out in haste or something like that. Those are creating negative impressions. I know it's like every interaction counts. I don't want to make it feel stressful or overly evaluative, but every interaction does count. It is an impression building exercise. And if you're interacting directly with an admissions person, those count, kind of accrue, still perhaps informally, but accrue toward you pretty directly. It's, you're interacting directly with admissions, even with clubs. And club members, if they are kind of interacting with admissions, these are often kind of intimate programs, small programs. I mentioned an example before of, certain clubs doing initial resume reads, or certain industry clubs doing initial resume reads, or interacting with admissions on some kind of semi-regular cadence. Well, good impressions are going to kind of organically accrue to your benefit in those ways. And negative impressions are going to, you don't want to be the name in that pool who say, oh my goodness, that person emails us twice a week and won't leave us alone and is rude. So I think you get the idea with that. Don't be demanding or badger students, alumni, or admissions. Be cognizant of where we are in the calendar. A lot of MBA, students just either graduated or finished their semester. They're starting internships. They're starting jobs. They're kind of seasonal lulls to people's responsiveness or club responsiveness. So, if you reach out to a few clubs and only hear from one or two of them, just run with those. Don't badger the ones that you didn't hear from. You can always try to circle back in a couple of months or when the semester restarts. Be thoughtful and authentic. Read the signals. What degree of openness exists? Don't make unreasonable asks. Use your professional intuition. Develop your professional intuition as you go through this process. What insights are you attempting to uncover as you do all of this? I think you could generally categorize these into resources and culture. I mean, that's such an oversimplification, but you're trying to understand, given your interests, your goals, your growth needs, who you are, your unique background, your unique perspective, how do you fit with a certain school or MBA program? A lot of the first place their brain goes is to, very kind of hard skill or academic resources, but it is so much broader than that. You're trying to learn about relevant resources for you, learn about the school, and learn about relevant resources for you, not only in the classroom, certain courses, professors, areas of focus, majors, concentrations, but also outside the classroom. I think you'd even argue that perhaps that the outside the classroom stuff is even grander or more robust. Experiential programs, not only courses, but clubs, case competitions, extracurriculars, leadership opportunities, soft skill development, leadership workshops, mentorship, community initiatives. You'll want to learn about recruiting and network. If you're coming from, let's say you're an international applicant who is interested in environmental sustainability, and it's a little bit unclear to you from reading the school's employment report online, what kind of jobs exist, or what for people graduating from a certain program who are interested in the business side of environmental sustainability. Well, the way to kind of unearth that is to connect with the sustainability club, whatever it's called, at that school, speak to somebody who has charted that recruiting path at that program in order to learn what are the pathways, what are the roles, how do people get those jobs coming out of this school? Is it through the Career Center? Are there companies that recruit there? If they are, which companies are there? What offices are they recruiting for what roles? I used international in this example because oftentimes international students, applying to U.S. programs, or if it's an American citizen applying outside of the U.S., you want to get a lay of the land for, which companies sponsor for visa, what's kind of the visa trajectory and the job trajectory. Are there companies out there that only hire, or prefer to hire domestic applicants because of some of these visa considerations? These conversations help enrich your understanding of all of that. On the cultural side, what are the unique values of the school? What are the defining aspects of their community? What's student life like? All of this, again, helps familiarize you with programs on the resources side and cultural side, decide where you best fit. And then later you could see at the bottom of this page, helps you kind of take that information and connect it in your essays, in your applications, in your interviews later on to your post-MBA goals, to your unique growth needs, to insights about their community and how you can uniquely contribute. Here's just one, kind of, I guess you could say, a visual of that, something that even kind of transcends this conversation, a narrative construct to keep in mind, and how this fits into that narrative construct. A narrative construct to keep in mind for the totality and entirety of your application process. Toward the right side of the screen, or under the purple, your post-MBA vision, your post-MBA career goals. What are your short and long-term post-MBA career goals? What's the passion and purpose behind those goals? What impact are you hoping to have? You will want to define those things as you go through this process, and ultimately, in a lot of essays, when you submit these applications, you will want to have clear and specific post-MBA goals, be able to articulate your post-MBA vision, short, medium, long-term. Then kind of rewind that to the other side of the page. Well, now think about, if those are my goals, what knowledge, skill, and experience do I already have that gives me a relevant foundation to achieve those goals? That's the ABC. Those are the ABC building blocks toward the other side of the page. Okay, if those are my goals and I already have knowledge, skill, experience, ABC that give me a relevant foundation to achieve those goals, what am I missing? I already have ABC. I'm missing X and Y and Z. This is another subset of knowledge, skills, and experience that you don't yet have, but are essentially the reason that you're applying to an MBA. These are your gaps, your YMBA. I list them in this kind of concrete XYZ way because I want to encourage you. Sometimes I even put 4 buckets for that. I want to encourage you to render those gaps very concrete, very specific, obviously very you specific. If that's YMBA, the column next to it highlighted in yellow there, that's your Y school. Why that specific school? How does that specific school fill these unique gaps? These conversations, this research, this engagement, this networking is going to fill you with ideas and concrete examples that are going to transcend or go way beyond any kind of base research you could do just on the internet. They are going to bring these examples to life. You're going to hear stories and tidbits and anecdotes and examples from people who have charted similar paths as you, who share your goals at that school, or share your background, or whoever you talk to. And all of a sudden now you have real life anecdotes and examples that can kind of tell that school in your applications, in your essays, in your interviews, why it is the perfect fit for your goals and growth needs. As I mentioned a moment ago, we're not focused here just on like academics and classes. It is way, way, way bigger than that. I've got the note at the bottom of the page to consider all corners of the MBA experience. Don't just consider the professional, but also be able to articulate personal and cultural fit. And you will want to also, it's not just about why that school for you, it's why you for that school. It's not just what you will take from a certain school. It's what you can uniquely give or contribute. You will want to use these conversations as ways to generate ideas about unique and specific contributions you can make to a given program, and be able to kind of channel that and render those specific, articulate those in your essays and in your interviews later on. Let's go back to some examples. I know we're going through a lot of detail here, but I think with a lot of this stuff, the devil is in the details. MBA outreach. So just to kind of take live or crystallize what all we were just talking about. These are some outreach samples. It's, a version of something we share with applicants. Look, make it yours. There are different versions of these. This is an example where if they allow you to email a certain ambassador directly, find the person that you think most aligns with your background. Remember the Columbia Hermes Society, connect with a student on Booth's page. There's going to be different versions of this. You'll be able to read student bios and figure out who would be the right person, the right student ambassador for you to connect with. I would say that this is roughly the length and amount of detail that you want in these initial overtures. Make these your own. Obviously, it's just kind of a skeleton with a lot of fill in the blanks within it. If you do have a developed resume that you think is of the quality early enough in this process to attach and that it would actually be beneficial, then feel free to attach it. If you've got a good LinkedIn page, I suppose you could, kind of link to that in your signature. Once there's a couple of other examples there. These are just slightly different tweaks. If you have to email a whole group rather than just one ambassador. Make sure you have the right names of schools, obviously, and be careful with copying and pasting. Questions you could ask. Again, these are things that we talk about and think about with the applicants we work with. This recruiting section at the top, I'll repeat it here. I mentioned it a moment ago. I think it is really, really important. If you are, you might know an industry you want to go into, or you have a job idea in mind post MBA, but you really, really want to develop a granular understanding of what the recruiting dynamics are like at a specific program for the specific jobs that you're interested in. If you're interested in investment banking, which banks hire at the school that you're targeting or talking about? Bulge bracket banks, middle market, which ones? Some more than others. Which ones hire international students? Which ones don't? What are the specific obstacles? This is kind of a tech example down here, but similar idea. We talked about resources. Again, make these your own. We talked about resources a moment ago, and again, carrying that tech example forward. Are there any technology specific? So you're talking to a student perhaps and asking them, what resources for folks interested in tech have really, really stood out to them? Again, you might have been able to read about these online, but hearing it directly from a student is going to bring it to life and give you ammunition and anecdote to share and make responses in an interview, examples in an essay so much more alive and compelling and oriented to you than just some generic thing you grabbed off of a blog post on the internet. It's not just about, again, professional resources. It can be soft skills, leadership skills, transformation and development as a leader. Ask questions about that if you're interested and if it's relevant to you. It's not just about resources. It's about culture and community as well. Consider, I often say to people, mind the preface to your question. By the way, I'm not suggesting you ask all these questions. You have to be targeted, cognizant, self-aware, situationally aware. Is it 3 questions that you might be able to ask in one of these interactions? Is the interaction 15 minutes or 30 minutes? Be respectful of people's time. Again, don't badger. These are just kind of a master list, not even a master list, but a list of examples. Mind the preface to your questions. Show that you're already familiar. You've already read about and know about some of the characteristics, qualities, values of a given school. For Haas, it might be the defining principles. Haas has 4 defining principles. Every school, again, has some version of this. Some are more codified and clear than others on their website. Sometimes you kind of have to read between the lines. Haas has 4 defining principles. Tuck, they tell you directly what their admissions criteria are. They've got 4 as well. Tuck students are smart. They're both admissions criteria as well as, I think, cultural qualities and student qualities that are present and palpable at the school. Tuck students are smart, accomplished, aware, and encouraging. MIT Sloan, they require a cover letter. At the beginning of that cover letter, they give you a paragraph that tells you who they look for and what qualities they look for. Lurking within this paragraph are qualities and themes about that school, about that community. Booth has the Chicago approach, among other things. These are just examples from a small handful of schools here. Familiarize yourself with those to some degree before interacting with admissions or students or alumni. You might be able to put an interesting preface in, show that you're familiar with a certain school's values, culture, community, and then ask an interesting question about it. In what specific ways do you find a certain of these values or that value live in action or present on campus? Now, all of a sudden, again, you have specific ammunition or anecdote. You can ask questions about student life. You can ask questions about network, and on and on and on and on. These are just some examples. We'll come to the home stretch here. Now, how do we do this? I've kind of, I think, ad-libbed a lot of the ways to use these insights to your benefit throughout the process along the way, or over the last almost hour now. But let's kind of summarize and institutionalize that in our brains a little bit. Some of these are going to be very explicit ways to use or deploy these insights. Others are going to be a little bit more implicit, organic, feel, impressions. There's really a mix thereof. And again, going back to one of our very first slides, it's not a contest who can laundry list the most touch points or interactions. It's not blind networking. It's thoughtful. And it's ultimately to help you decide what's the right school for me. Am I the right person for that school as well? And then to articulate these points in your application. One of the most obvious ways that this helps you, I've said it a couple of times, but of course, school selection. If I'm interested in a certain industry, if I want to recruit into a certain industry, is it a good fit? What jobs, what companies, what's the strength of the recruiting? What's the strength of the program? On the resource side, am I a right fit for that program? Cultural side, do I resonate? Do I click? Do I see myself there? Do we fit? You're going to pick up school-specific tidbits along the way. You might hear about something new that they're building that people are kind of talking about but doesn't exist yet, but hasn't been written about yet, on the website somewhere. You might pick up some application tidbits. We breezed past it a little bit earlier. We could pull it back up in a second. Texas McCombs last year announced that right after you apply, you have this semi-formal opportunity to connect with an admissions ambassador for, I think it was a 30-minute chat. They even kind of give you a tutorial that I've been describing here about like how to approach that. Be ready to talk about, be ready to introduce yourself, maybe talk a little bit about why McCombs and why MBA and what your goals are, and come with, 3 or so interesting questions. It's not required, but hey, if you were engaging with this school and attending some events and chatting with some people, there's almost no way you wouldn't know that that's something you should very strongly consider after you hit submit at McCombs. You're going to pick up on school-specific verbiage and themes. We looked at some examples just a moment ago of Haas's 4 defining principles. MIT Sloan, what they look for in applicants: mens et manus, mind at hand, the Chicago approach. And there's so much richness within the Chicago approach. I mean, so many nuances and themes within that. Why are you here? Why Booth and not somewhere else? It hangs on the wall of the Harper Center. There's so many of these tidbits for every school. You're going to kind of learn the language and learn those themes, not so you can, inauthentically regurgitate them in your applications, in your essays, in your interviews, but so that you can kind of marry them to you in an authentic and genuine and specific way in your applications, essays, and interviews. There are application entries. We're going to pull up some examples of this, but some schools will literally ask you, who have you talked to in their application? Again, goal not to laundry list, but they will have a section in the application that says, please tell us which events you've attended, which of our school's events you've attended. Please tell us which students, alumni, or admissions personnel you've interacted with, and they'll have a box or some fill-ins where you could do that. You don't want to get caught flat-footed on that. It's not like if I list 10 people, I'm going to get in. It's not a contest, but thoughtful, meaningful interactions, not getting caught flat-footed or blank on that. Once in a while, somebody we haven't interacted with will come reaching out to Avanti Prep just a couple of days before a deadline, and they'll think that they have, great essays or they're ready to submit, and their essays are totally devoid of a unique and specific articulation of fit, professional and personal fit, contribution ideas between them and the program that they're targeting. And in addition, why is that? Well, they've never talked to anyone. They've never attended any events. They know nothing really about the program. So not only would they have to keep that application entry box empty, their essays, there's no school specificity, school fit in their essays. We'll pull up some examples of how to deploy this in essays with contributions in a moment. Recommendations and letters of support. I mean, recommenders, great if they could orient some of the themes in their recommendations to the specific values of a certain school. A lot of schools ultimately kind of share what they look for behind the scenes in programs, but some are more overt about it. Some will even ask, kind of an extra recommendation question. NYU Stern has an extra recommendation question about EQ, and Stern is very big on the marriage of EQ and IQ. They ask an extra recommendation question about it. So, the more you familiarize yourself with a program, the more you can brief your recommender before they write their recommendation about ideas, themes, examples for that. Some schools have letters of support, more like endorsements or informal ways that existing students or alumni can kind of vouch for or support a candidate, either through informal portals or Fuqua and Booth actually have like online pages where alumni or students can do that. Again, a lot of it comes back to both the explicit articulation of your fit as well as this kind of organic interest, that this implicit feeling, wow, this person really knows us. This applicant really knows our school. They know the resources well. They've thought specifically about how, what they'll do and how they'll contribute when they're here. And some of these other ways where they've connected with a certain club, and that club, maybe your name is coming up Maybe a certain admissions officer remembers you from a couple of good interactions at the end of an event or the end of a webinar. Maybe you signed up for a chat or exchanged an email in between. So impression building is certainly part of this as well. Let's wrap up with one more visit to one of our web windows. So this is that Texas McCombs example that I breezed past before, and I kind of categorized it under application tidbits or ways to engage. But the Admissions Connection is a live virtual get-to-know-you session that serves an opportunity for applicants to engage with a full-time admissions ambassador. So it is 15 minutes. It is a student ambassador. It's virtual. They give you tips along the way. It's only a 15-minute conversation. Be ready for an introduction. Keep it around 2 minutes, 1 to 3 minutes. Don't talk forever. Don't eat up 8 minutes of the 15-minute conversation with your introduction. Mix personal and professional in the introduction. Be prepared with 3 to 5 questions about the program. Your topics you could consider. So this is both kind of a tidbit, an application tidbit that's specific to McCombs, as well as a way to engage, a way to make a good impression, and a reminder or some tips and tutorials about how to approach these conversations. I mentioned a moment ago that Fuqua and Booth have very specific, like actual links on their websites where if an alum, if a current student, if somebody, strongly affiliated with that MBA program knows you and has worked with you, this shouldn't be somebody that, just barely knows you or you met and have a superficial relationship, but somebody who knows you with some substance. I don't know, a university classmate, a former colleague that you worked with just with some degree of substance, maybe a former boss. Once in a while, you'll see somebody who develops there'll be an applicant who develops a real relationship with a current student along the way over the course of their interactions, and that prospective student feels like that current student feels like they know the prospective student well enough to submit something like this. But these are some portals for Fuquans and Boothies to do that. Booth calls it Shape the Class, and there is a similar way to submit information. These are for Booth students, current students, or alumni to submit, a kind of, I guess you could say, soft recommendation or letter of support or endorsement. Again, it doesn't mean that if you have these, it doesn't mean that because this can be done, it should be done. They should know you with some substance, some real substance. It doesn't mean that if this happens, you're going to get in, but it's another kind of tool in the toolkit. And even if schools don't have formal links or portals to do this, there are other kind of soft ways for it to happen. Emails can be sent. I would say probably better to a specific admissions officer than to a general inbox. But absent anything else, you could, always go to a specific inbox. I mentioned a moment ago, let's zoom in a little bit here, application entries. So, you're going to get a question. This is an example from Columbia and Michigan. Have you ever spoken with a Columbia Business School representative or attended an admission-sponsored event? Please tell us who or what. Do you know any current students at Columbia Business School? Please name them. Have you attended any Ross events or been in contact with anybody from the Ross community in the past year? And they're looking for details about that. You could just list as they've asked. You could sometimes, I wouldn't write a book here, but take ill-advised advantage of the space that they've given you. But sometimes if you are interested in, if your whole kind of application goals and story is oriented around your aspirations in real estate, and you've spoken with a couple of current students who are really deeply, the president of the real estate club at one of these programs, it might be worth noting. It probably is worth noting not just the name of the person that you spoke with, but the fact that they are president of the real estate club or whatever it is, adding kind of a phrase of relevance into the listing probably not like full sentences because they are ultimately just looking for lists here, but I think some titling, some indication of relevance, that you didn't just kind of randomly speak with whoever. If it was a student ambassador, I think certainly noting that as well. We talked a lot about how to kind of convert, how to evolve and enrich your understanding of the specifics of a program to take, I'll zoom in a little bit more for you here, to take what you've learned and turn it and make it come to life in your essays and your applications. A very basic, somebody who just, we see and we receive tons of these every year. Somebody who thinks that, again, they're ready to apply, and we look at their essays and we're like, ooh, too basic. Or people who get dinged and they reach out and say, I can't figure out why I got dinged. I told them I was interested in this case, consulting and energy. Well, somebody might have very basics, like your starting point is basic. I'm interested in a certain industry or a certain topic or a certain area. How do you use school research and engagement to enrich and enliven that in your essays? I've kind of taken these and bulletized them and anonymized them from real life essays, but a basic version of somebody who's interested in the intersection of consulting and energy. Maybe they are, they want to transition into consulting, and after serving as a generalist for 2 years, specialize in energy. They had a little bit of a civil engineering background. They were exposed to some of this energy related and natural resource matters. So they got a little bit of a footing, a little bit of a foundation for it. Well, a first draft of that essay might just say, well, I'm interested in such and such a major, such and such a specialization. But after they talked to the co-chair of the Booth Energy Group, they learned about the Energy and Clean Tech Lab. And yeah, they could have read about the Energy and Clean Tech Lab online. But by hearing about it from a person who lived it, they start to learn about like real life anecdotes and examples of how classmates and academics and professionals were there together. Booth is huge on constructive debate and the collision of ideas. Now this applicant started to hear from somebody who shared their interests at Booth, how this collision of ideas manifested in a real and tangible and specific way in the exact area of their interest. This becomes a very lively example for an essay. They also picked up other tidbits along the way. Professor Blumberg, who's there, has a background on McKinsey's energy and climate change leadership team. I don't think, if I recall correctly, that was something listed on the professor's bio, but all of a sudden that anecdote, that factoid, is something that further enriches the reference. Here's another example. And again, I don't want you to think that, goals, when I say goals essays, I'm talking about kind of the classic MBA essay. They get spliced and diced a little differently from school to school, but what are your post-MBA goals? Why do you need an MBA, and why our school? Oftentimes, classically kind of packaged together in a 500-word essay or cut up a little bit into slightly shorter versions. It doesn't have to be purely professional, like that energy and consulting example we just looked at. Here's somebody else who, in a first draft on kind of the soft skill leadership development side, they said, well, I want to develop as a leader by taking Wharton's executive coaching and feedback program, ECFP. They read about it online. They dropped it in there, but there's no substance to it. It's a dead reference. Why is that specific to them and their needs and their goals? We're kind of getting into like essay crafting stuff here, and how do you develop the specificity and compellingness of your essay. So I don't want to, veer too much into that topic. But the point here is that the school research and engagement, the conversations that this individual had with people at Wharton who kind of shared their background or interests, were ultimately able to help them enliven and enrich that example, where they were able to ultimately articulate it in an engaged and applicant-specific, them-specific way. They're able to get into specific skills that they'll need in their future career goals. That in this case, they'll have to be able to influence operating companies' boards if they're working in private equity. And right now they got very kind of self-aware and even vulnerable with this next sentence. I've, again, anonymized it or genericized it. But although I have experience in X, right now my tendency, my tendency to want to please everybody often inhibits my ability to be decisive. I'm kind of making that up on the spot, but don't be afraid to be self-aware, insightful, reflective, even vulnerable, and then talk about, in this case, how leadership development offerings at Wharton tie specifically to your goals, your developmental needs. They're so you specific, so growth specific. We'll close with this. So same idea, but on the contributions front. I've said numerous times throughout this conversation, we don't want the admissions committee to walk away feeling like you're only going to take from the program. What are you going to give to that program? What can you uniquely contribute? Your engagement, your conversations with current students and alumni and such, they are going to help you develop these ideas. So somebody here interested in real estate is actually another Wharton example. A very basic kind of idea or contribution. Somebody would say, well, yeah, I'll contribute by joining the real estate club, or I'll contribute by running for president even, or a leadership position of the real estate club. Well, how much richer would that be if that individual engaged with a current leader of the real estate club, in this case, the president of the real estate club, mention their name and their graduation year, bring that to life. Along the way and through those conversations, they learned that Wharton hadn't won a certain real estate competition in some number of years. No knock on Wharton. Obviously, they have a very, very, very strong footing in real estate. Just so happened to be an example or a tidbit that came up in this case. They actually identified, from speaking with the current president of the Wharton Real Estate Club, what she felt the team was lacking in that case. And then the applicant was able to articulate, they had kind of a real estate adjacent background in engineering, in the engineering space, how that applicant could use their unique experiences and skills to fill those gaps. He was also able to brainstorm with the current president of the real estate club some ideas around how to expand a new initiative that the current president had created. So how could, if I'm saying I want to be the next leader of the real estate club, hopefully in a year or two, how can I identify gaps and build on things? Wharton has in recent years, for several years now, had a whole SA2 related to how applicants can uniquely, how can draw on their unique background and perspectives and experiences to make unique and specific contributions at Wharton, even if a school doesn't have specific essays dedicated to that, like Wharton does, like Cornell has had in recent years, like Duke Fuqua has had for some time. Even if you don't have explicit essays around that, we want to make sure that you are thinking about these things and making these articulations and finding space for them in appropriate essays. Even if the explicit question is not asked, how you'll contribute, we want to find ways to get that in there. We want to find ways to get that in your interview conversations. And we want your contribution ideas to be very thoughtful, meaningful, specific. And how do they become thoughtful, meaningful, and specific? They do so through good engagement, good, specific, relevant engagement. Last one, another example from the contributions front. Well, I could contribute. So I kind of, with each of these, the goals and the contributions, I'm trying to do one that's a little more professional and one that's a little bit more kind of soft skill, personal, community. Because I don't want you to walk away thinking that your why MBA, your why that school is just professional, your contributions are just professional. Here's a softer side on the contribution, or something a little more community related. I can contribute my experience with diverse people and cultures. Okay, great. Schools like that, but it's so generic. Through conversations and connections, this seed of an idea for this applicant was able to evolve into a deeper understanding of how Fuqua, Team Fuqua, which has within it 6 paired principles. You can look those up if you're applying to Fuqua. You should get familiar with them. You should internalize Team Fuqua, what it stands for. 6 paired principles. 2 of those paired principles are collective diversity and supportive ambition. This person was able to learn real life examples from the student ambassador they spoke with about how those manifest on campus. Well, this particular applicant grew up in a little bit of a unique situation. They grew up in 3 different countries. They have a lot of experience navigating, adapting, bringing people together professionally. They had to mediate between US companies and European executives. And so that unique basis, they're able to marry their unique background and perspective to articulate this, in this case, very real, organic, and authentic fit with these pillars of Team Fuqua. And ultimately, of course, this does need to channel. It's what will you contribute? What contribution ideas do you have? They had an idea to create a new, it was kind of in the realm of a cross-cultural workshop. They gave it a name. They had almost kind of articulating a plan within it. What does it look like? What does it feel like? What kind of topics will they cover? How often does it run? So again, these are ways that school engagement, school networking, meaningful conversations, meaningful insights can enrich, enliven, and render specific all of your application materials across all of the different topics that we discussed today. And then, among other things, this list, which I think is going to come up on the screen, or is not going to come up on the screen. There it is. We'll close there. We just looked at those examples. We invite you, of course, to explore our services. Visit avantiprep.com. We do encourage people to read our verified client testimonials. I think that's the best way to deeply familiarize yourself with what is the experience like working with the level of detail, the level of dedication, the level of commitment, the benefits that working with us brings. You'll be able to read about past clients' experiences. We invite you to sign up for a free consultation. We've got a couple of discounts there listed. You could use the code ENGAGE or reference this video for $100 off any service through June 30th, through the rest of the month, with a minimum of a 2.5-hour sign up. We offer 1 free hour of founder service. This is a really good special, I guess you could say. 1 free hour of founder service for every 5 hours that you sign up with a senior consultant. Again, we hope to have the chance to chat with you. I hope that the conversation today was beneficial. Let's take a couple of questions before we wrap up here. We have one question asking whether business schools keep a record of these interactions when you apply, and does it show up in your profile somehow? I would say some do, some don't, but perhaps more importantly, most of them will ask you, many of them will ask you in the application. We looked at 2 examples of Columbia Business School, Ross, almost inviting you to share that information. So I would not like lean on the school to say, oh, this person attended this or attended that. I think depending on their kind of CRM system, some will capture it, some will not. But I think the onus is more on you to share the explicit, where they do ask in those boxes, events you've attended, people you've chatted with. Again, it's not a contest who can laundry list the most of these. But it's really up to you to and even more importantly than those naming those explicit things, it's the feel, it's the richest. They're not going to have a record of like students you spoke with. They wouldn't have that. Those are like one-off, or alumni. Those are one-off conversations that you're having on your own. I did mention some of the ways that if it's a student ambassador or if it's a certain club that kind of links in a little bit with admissions, then there could be an informal way that if you make a good impression or your name comes up or you're on somebody's radar, that it could be relevant, that it could come into play. But I think it's more, okay, list them if they ask, but show how. We looked at that these big examples from goals, essays, and contributions, you want to show how the insights you gleaned, not just that you had those conversations, but the insights that you gleaned have enriched things. Another question about how much to generalize about a school's culture from coffee chats with current students. And I think the question here is like, how much should I read into? I'm only talking to a couple of people. And, I don't know, you could get a current student who maybe didn't have a great experience. And, might view the school one way, talk to another student who had a fantastic experience. They view the school another way. I think that you never want to overgeneralize. Speaking with current students is the best way, I think, to learn about the kind of lived experience at that school. But you don't want to, like, each opinion, each perspective is ultimately just one opinion or perspective. You could talk to somebody who's really focused on academics at a given program because that's just how they're wired, and they came there to learn certain hard skills in the area of interest that they're focused on, and they want to build those hard skills. And they'll tell you that academics are a big part and they take up a lot of their time each week. You can talk to another person who's in an MBA program and their primary focus is on ushering along an entrepreneurial endeavor over the course of those 2 years. And they're not as checked in on academics. And they might tell you, yeah, class doesn't take up too much time. So I wouldn't overgeneralize, nor on the cultural side. Like, but still, if you have a couple of these conversations or a few of these conversations, I think you could start to build a picture and a feeling for what is the chemistry and the gist and the culture of a certain program. We have a question here asking or saying, I spoke to 3 or 4 students from the same school. None of them shared anything substantial other than, we're fun and collaborative, even after probing. I don't know. You're saying you probed. Is there a way to be a little more specific or targeted in the way you ask those questions? Could you identify a specific value or values about that school that you've read and heard about, and ask, is there a specific way that you've seen this value come to life or lived or embodied in a classmate, in a professor, in a class at that program? So, and if I don't know, if ultimately you feel like there isn't, then you have 3 or 4 of those conversations. Maybe you could start to draw your own conclusions about whether that program is the right fit for you. We'll take 1 or 2 more questions here. We do have a last question here about, how do we choose our recommenders? That's a little bit of a different topic. Probably save that for another day. I am very likely going to be doing a recommendation video for GMAT Club in a few weeks. Very briefly, how do we choose our recommenders? For full-time MBA programs, you're typically going to want people who have managed you and know you deeply. Oftentimes that's professional, though if you are very involved extracurricularly, meaning like outside of work, a community organization, an NGO, and there's somebody who was your superior or you reported to through that can be a very interesting, a very interesting voice or perspective as well. I mean, obviously you want people who you think would support you and endorse you, who would take this process seriously, who would dedicate requisite time to it. The important thing though is it's people who know you deeply and with real substance and can speak very specifically to you and your skills, your accomplishments, your experiences. We'll talk about ways on this hopefully upcoming recommender selection, recommendation strategy, how to approach recommendation type video. We'll talk about some ways to do all that in a more deep and specific manner What themes could each of your recommenders focus on? How do they support or illustrate the strengths or themes that they talk about with specific and concrete examples, and so forth? So let's leave it there for today. Taking up enough of your time. I hope it was helpful. And I hope that the details here, again, I think the devil is in the details with so much of this. It's not stuff that you can just, throw your hat at. You have to grapple with it. And if you have more questions about that or how it relates to you specifically, feel free to reach out for a free consultation. We'd love to work with you. Morgan Bernstein, the former executive director, the former head of full-time MBA admissions at Berkeley Haas. I probably should have said this at the beginning of the video. It will now be working with Avanti Prep, and we'll be offering some services through her, front end store. We call it story and strategy. Front end of the application process, and a kind of mock AdCom read and review a little later in your application process for mid to late stage applicants. Morgan can work in concert with me, in concert with one of our senior consultants. So please take a look at our services, sign up for a free consultation. We hope to chat with you. We wish you the best of luck throughout your process. Have a great day.